I think it's an easy place to start in terms of your filmography. We'll start with Primal Fear.
You're taking me back into the dim recesses of detailed memory. It may get foggy, but I think that I think it was an unusual situation where lots of young actors were aware somehow. It was just. It was one of those things that it was just leaking around that there was going to be more of not an open call, but more a more wide ranging sort of for an actual good role. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that was things like that tended to percolate. And I heard about it from Connie Britton, the actress who, because we were friends, and we used to live around the corner from each other. I'd bump into her sometimes, and she was going to an audition one time. I ran into her on the street, and she was like, "I'm going to this audition. I think I'm going to bail and go to lunch with my friend." And I was like, "Why? You should do it." And she said, "I don't know. It's some kid like advertising in backstage." And I was like, "Come on, Connie, like you should go." I urged her. So then I see her and she goes, "You made me go to that audition. I got it, but I don't think I'm going to do it." And I was like, "Why not?" And she goes, "Well, it's this like little independent film, and this kid's doing it like in his parents' home for 10 weekends in a row." And I was like, you should do it. Like, you've never done a film and blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So she did it. And then that turned out to be the Brothers McMullen. And she got, that she went to LA, she got an agent, and she was doing a lot of auditioning. And she like always she was always like, you made me do that. And then she was auditioning for the part that Maura Tierney played in Primal Fear.
Okay.
And she called me from the Paramount lot. She went to a payphone and called me and said, she said, "I have the weirdest feeling." She was like, "I'm going to return the favor to you." She goes, "They're seeing people for this role. And I have the spookiest feeling. It's like made for you. And you should call Deb Aquila, the casting director at Paramount." And Deb was like the great indie film casting director in New York. She did like Last Exit to Brooklyn and Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And she knew me from theater or auditions for them. I can't remember. So I faxed her. I'm dating myself. I faxed her and said like, "Hey, I read for you guys on this. I heard maybe you're reading people for this project with Richard Gere, and I'd love to come in." So that's how Connie got me. And I think she even said something to them to kind of like, that made them go, "Yeah, we did like that guy, like blah, blah, blah." So there was this like funny wheel of karma on that between Connie and I, and she was the one who alerted me originally. I think people made a lot out of that. It was sort of like the Nirvana demo tape, my screen tests on it. It was like, it went around, and I was sort of like, why is everybody seeing this? Like, why am I hearing about people seeing it at parties in Hollywood and shit like that? But it was, I thought sometimes it was it got hyped up. I did things that I always did in auditions. I didn't like chit chat before auditions. I thought it was unstrategic, because I thought, like, why would you say, "Hi, I'm Edward. Yeah, I did this and blah blah and blah blah." Okay, now let me like do the drug addict, for this part on, Law and Order, or whatever. I just thought, like, let's talk after, you know what I mean, or not at all. Why don't I just come in and actually do the thing? And I had a habit of trying to get casting directors to just let me come in and do the bit, and it was effective. I had other situations where I felt directors appreciated it in a way. Like, I felt like they, not even just that it conveyed a seriousness, but more that it reminded them, yeah, that's right, that's how this works. Like, let me not have any preconceived things. And so it wasn't something I did specifically for that. I just, when I went in for Deb, I think I had passed the message to her assistant or something. Can I not talk or catch up? Can we just come in and sit down and do the thing? And because I had this kind of notion about it, the role was not very fully formed. It wasn't what it became in the film. There was a very muddy part of it at the time about whether, in fact, he was like, it was a demonic possession, or it was not so clearly defined as a complete con. You know what I mean? But I thought, regardless, at the time, that I thought, since there was supposed to be like this kind of violent schism between the two halves of the personality, whether it was real or being faked or whatever, that was still to be sorted out. I thought, that maybe like stuttering was a great way to engineer immediate sympathy. It wasn't in the script, but I just thought that's something you can do without presuming to mess around with their script, that has an effect that's subconscious, that's not about an interpretation of the words. It's going to create like a sense of overwhelming, oh God, this poor like harmless stuttering rube from Appalachia or whatever. So I think that it was a choice that maybe punched through the kind of straight up the middle reads on it that they were getting. And Deb, thank God, Deb was it worked on her. And Deb was this is one of those things that Deb was really, she was and is one of the great casting directors, and she kind of got what I was doing. And I actually think what happened was the rumors that got going around were partly because of her. I think Deb kind of amped up to the director almost, because she was really on my side in a way. I think she kind of amped up the idea that I was from there. And because I never said anything about that. I never pretended to be
from Kentucky.
No, I never did. I never like, that happened by osmosis. And I, in retrospect, because I love her and know her, I think Deb might have almost been like building this story about this kid from nowhere, who is this thing, because she had me come in and do the same thing with Greg Hoblet the first time he came to New York. No talk, no nothing. I went in, Deb read with me. She had set it up like a thing, and we just came in and did it, and I left. I never talked to Greg, never, you know what I mean? So I think she created a little of the mystique around it, because, God bless her, she was like really advocating for me at that point. And it snowballed. It got ridiculous. Like, by the time I was in LA shooting the movie, maybe even when I went to do the screen test, there was there was literally this like crazy story on the street that they'd cast a kid from the Ozarks. Somehow it went from being Appalachia to the Ozarks, which gives you a sense of Hollywood's sense of geography. But literally, it was like, it was crazy. It was like
and amazing that happened before the age of social media, where
yeah,
those things catch fire.
By the way, it wasn't even it was on a VHS.
Yeah.
I remember the tape was going around. It was on a VHS. But I was going to places. I think I was done shooting the movie. I was in LA. I was enjoying myself, and maybe I wasn't a snazzy enough dresser for LA at the time, but I remember being at parties and people coming up and going, oh, "You're that kid from the Ozarks," and I was like, "I went to Yale, man. What the hell are you talking about?" But it was funny.
Yeah. No, I did one of these with Richard Gere not long ago, and he talked about how he almost that casting process was so difficult. He almost walked away from the project.
Yes, he was right. I learned later he was all like 1 foot out the door on it. There was other funny things. Leonardo DiCaprio, who's a really good pal of mine, he had passed on it. And I heard that, and weirdly that did a weird thing to me, because of course it was like a career. It was like a once in a lifetime sort of career shot. But something in me, I thought Leo was terrific. Like, I really thought he was one of the better young actors around, and I thought he was right. I was like, this is a mess. It was a mess. Like, Greg thought it was a mess. Richard kind of thought it was a mess.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, they got excited about me. They got excited about it excited Richard. But then when I came into it, everybody really realized we really need to fix this. Like, it needs to be engineered around the good idea that's going on here. And Ann Bitterman, the screenwriter, who is one of my great friends still, they brought Ann in initially to punch up the relationship stuff between Richard and Laura Linney, but we all got talking, Richard and Greg and Ann and me. And I remember being in Chicago for rehearsals, and they still hadn't worked out the ending. The ending, and ultimately, Richard, to his enormous credit, there was a whole lot of stuff about, like, no, the kid needs to be really damaged. It can't be that he outfoxes Richard Gere, like Richard's the hero. Or it was like, okay, so he is lying and it's all a fake, but he can't get over it. Richard has to win in the end and everything. And Richard, I remember being at this lunch in Chicago, this rehearsal, and Richard was just like, he's really polite, but he got really fed up, and he was like, you know what, like, this is ridiculous. He's like, you're trying to protect me. He's like, all the things people, all the cliches, that I'm slick, that I'm arrogant, that I'm everything, that all feeds it. It's a body blow. The last shot of the movie, my shoulders are sagging. He trumped me. He killed me. He cut me off at the legs. It's over. It's done. That's the end of the movie. Like, and he was the one who was really like, stop trying to game this so I don't lose. Like, he goes, he really, in the end, was the one who kind of cleared the path for us to lean into the full commitment that this was a complete con. And that's, like, honestly, I think what made it suddenly click. Like, it everything, for everybody, it was suddenly like, oh, once you reverse engineer from that, everybody sort of realized, oh, now this makes sense. Like, now we're not, effing around with, like, well, is he authentically bipolar? Does he have multiple personality disorder? Is he possessed? Is he, what's going on? Like, suddenly it was like, no, it's this. We're working toward this ending. Now it's all a thing. And then it all started to track. It was like, ooh, this is so manipulative. This is so great. And the whole thing became like about, let's build a jigsaw puzzle of somebody being conned who thinks he's the ultimate slickster, and he's the ultimate cynic. He gets emotionally bought in, and then he gets, like, wiped out. And that's suddenly it was fun. You know what I mean? It was burdened for a long time by, like, what is this exactly? And it showed me actually really early on that, like, you got to sometimes you just got to stick with it. You got to, like, hammer on it and even in movies, sometimes you're discovering it, you're figuring it out on the fly, which can be a little nervy, but it was like, once we found the kind of it's almost like the old principle that the simplest explanation is the best one, and we were caught up in all these complexities, and then suddenly it was like, no, he's faking. And once we got into that, it was like, then we were in the slot,
Let's talk American History X. This is one of those films that, unfortunately, kind of astonishingly, seems timelier now than it did upon its release 20 years ago. How do you look back at the challenge of not just portraying but humanizing this reformed neo-Nazi?
I think what's surprising is that the specific sort of the specific targets of this character's rage felt like it felt like things that were confined to a kind of a marginal and highly extreme subculture, and now it's like guys in button-down shirts and khakis and prep school combed hair. It's like it's why I think what's most disconcerting is the degree to which people have mainstreamed some of this stuff. But it's not, to me, it always was something, we viewed it as a modern day Shakespearean tragedy. Like we were approaching it from the point of view of like, the skin of it is modern, but it's timeless. It's a classical approach to a tragedy. Like David McKenna and I spent a lot of time thinking through like how we could his original thing was kind of there was a subplot about drug dealing in it, and as we talked about it more and more, we were like, you know what, like let's just peel away all this fat and go at the core of this, which is that, like Othello or Macbeth or anything like that, this is a guy with enormous potential. He's not a marginal figure. He's like a general. Mm-hmm. Let's let you see all the things, all the qualities that he has that could have been applied in positive ways, and show that like rage, anger destroys him, and once we kind of distilled it down into that, it was sort of timeless. It felt like you're getting at essential things here, which is, sure, it's about a skinhead, but you want it, like Joseph Campbell talks about transparency, that stories work best if people can see themselves in it. And in some measure, we want to say, yes, it's a very heightened character, but ultimately it's just about the corrosive effect of anger. And that anger distorts and warps and destroys, and that is something people can relate to in their own lives, and it can be a cautionary tale. And I think that the nice thing about approaching it that way for me, honestly, was that it's always better to be able to connect to the fact that a character in his own mind feels right. Mm-hmm. A character in their own mind feels. I mean, you can play. Like if you're Ralph Fiennes and you're playing Voldemort in Harry Potter, that's kind of that's like a villain, right? He's a supernatural version of evil, right? But mm-hmm. if you're playing a human character, they have a point of view, and you have to sort of be willing to embrace the point of view, or at least empathize with where they're coming from. And by making him intelligent, it was like a avenue for me to come at it in my own, in a way that's unexpected, because you're not used to the trappings are what you want to be able to dismiss because they're so extreme. But if he's able to articulate himself, it's it's almost like when you're in a high school debate and they make you take the position, they make you debate one side and then they make you debate the other side. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like that. It was like, if we make this guy like an awesomely articulate debater and he's like this thing, that's like a really fearsome and destabilizing kind of a presentation, right? Mm-hmm. Because then he's a general, he's a leader, he's a forceful, he has a forceful point of view, and that's tricky. That becomes tricky because you're sort of going, ooh, I don't like this, but I hear where he's coming from. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It sort of makes you deal with it. It's almost like what I liked about like Spike Lee's great film Do the Right Thing, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of very, very, very provocative stuff in it, but there's compassion. He like makes you understand the racist pizza maker. He makes you understand, where people are coming from, mm-hmm. and why, and that's provocative.
Surely every film buff remembers their first time experiencing Fight Club. What can you tell us about your first time experiencing it on the page and recognizing the potential that it had?
Well, we all read the book, which is great. The book the book was all the things that the film is at core. It was sardonic and funny and weird and just incredibly unique. The book was small. The book is very interior. It's like, and it's funny because like people have asked me about Motherless Brooklyn. Motherless Brooklyn as a book is a very interior thing, and we wanted to make it cinematic. And sometimes you have something where there's like a core of a thing, but that's not itself a film at all. It's not even the armature of a film. It's a vibe, or it's a the book of Fight Club had this sense of the zeitgeist, right? It had this sense of like a generational complaint in it. But Fincher, like, made it a canvas, he took it and blew it up, blew it apart, kept the core of it, and then turned it into this like much more cinematic, phantasmagorical, surrealist kind of comedy. You know what I mean? The thing is, at the beginning, I think it's almost like the opposite of what we were saying about Primal Fear, where it was like, my recollection of Fight Club is that at the very beginning, it was like, read this book. Do you think it's funny? I think it's funny. Do you think it's funny? I think it's funny. It's like, do we all get it? Are we all getting the same joke? We're all getting the same joke. Okay, this is going to be good. You know what I mean? It's like there was a lot of alignment around what we were doing, and I think that's not to say like you're debating this, you're working on that. Like, is this part a little more serious, or is this where we're having a lot of fun? What, the balances of the thing you're always wrestling with. But at core, it was like we knew what we were taking aim at, and we were all we knew that Fincher was doing something like that he had the musculature. He was like in just prime shape. It was like even if you looked at the storyboards, you were like, oh my God, like what he's going for broke on this. You know what I mean? And it was cool. It was a cool feeling. But my principal recollection of that whole thing was laughing. I think when you look at the photos of us all making it, it's very hard to find photos where we're not cracking up.
How intense were those actual fight scenes, though?
They were intense, but film fighting is like it's more like dance. It's choreography more than it is intensity. Of course, it's intensity, but a lot of what makes film violence intense is the quality of the filmmaking. It's performance somewhat, but it becomes a very technical thing about making things have visceral impact, and that has a lot to do with the technical things. And Fincher's a master of film violence, of kinetic filmmaking. Because he is very technically demanding, there's a lot of repetition, and I would say that to the degree that there was, like injury in it, it wasn't a function of like people being overly intense and being out of control. It was a function of repetition and the odds that you're going to catch a stray elbow or something like that. But it was incredibly well, for something with as much potential for people to get hurt. It was managed beautifully. Like the dance going on between him as a filmmaker, the fight choreographers, all of us. It was very exacting, and as a result, it was pretty. Took a long time, but it was done right. it was done right. You know, every injury I've ever gotten making a film, like really, like having my nose broken, having my back broken, all of them were from experiences where things were being rushed, things were being, you know, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we do that? And actually people are getting too intense. Like they're getting, you know, the person who broke my nose in a film like was winding himself up too much instead of being clinical and technical. And I think Fight Club was really, really pro.
What film was that on?
Now I'm going to make another actor feel bad, so I'm not going to say.
Okay. I didn't know if it was out there.
No, it was a really nice person.
Okay. It was an accident.
Yes, it was an accident, yeah.
I know you've cited Robert De Niro as a very early inspiration of yours. I'm sure Marlon Brando is right up there. How meaningful or even surreal was that for you as an actor to share the screen with those guys?
It was great. Fortunately, I knew them both. I had gotten to know them both before, so I felt on comfortable footing with them, which was important because there's a vibe in the film even of like insistence on respect in a way, you know, like my character is sort of almost like saying he's kind of a young Turk and he's kind of insisting on his space. It was easier to step into that more aggro of the three role if knowing them and knowing that they that we were in it together and that they, especially Bob, knowing that he wanted me there, you know what I mean? That he'd been super, super, super encouraging to me, even in the years before that. And Marlon I had gotten to know through mutual friends. The guy who produced Mike Medavoy, the legendary studio executive and producer who produced The People vs. Larry Flint, which was my third film. Marlon, I got word from him that Marlon had seen American History X and seen Larry Flint and really liked those films, and so I met him through Mike and had a really good rapport with him. It was his last film, so it was really special. We didn't know that at the time, but it was I did it for that reason alone. Like it was another one where it was a genre film. It was a heist film. It had been written with very, very different actors in mind. It had been written as a caper, more of a tongue-in-cheek, something like I don't even know what to compare it to. It was much more of a wink-wink. Not Ocean's 11. That's not the right, but it had a lightness of touch that once. It became, I think De Niro went in it, and then he kind of was like recruited, you know, suggested me, and then together we were like, well, we were kind of like, should we call should we see if we can get Marlon Brando, and wouldn't that be a thing? And then, and once it became that, it had to be completely retooled for the three of us, and they hired me I did a rewrite on that one for us. And I tried to retool it for the three of us, you know, almost make it like Three Thieves, but like analogous to Three Actors, like or something like that. And it was so in a weird way I felt like I got to sort of make it about the way they were inspiring to me in a funny way. But they were great. I mean, there was some stupid stuff like about conflict between Marlon and Frank Oz, the director. But those things tend to. It was like before clickbait, but it's sort of like clickbait. People like to manufacture a thing. But the truth is, I thought Marlon was brilliant. He was brilliant. He had a very he had such an intuitive. He was a very intuitive, wonderfully experimental, and I just thought it was a total pleasure. And Bob he's so disciplined. He is very. I don't think I'd done at that time actually films that were like genre, maybe around or something. But there was put it this way, there was a certain amount of. It was a studio heist thriller, right? and there's a certain amount of there's a different sort of pressure and expectation, like that, and it can produce in you an impulse that you need to service the expectations, and so you can get into a place as an actor that's a very bad place to be, which is like, I call it like acting for the dailies. Like it's almost like you're trying to reassure everybody that there's lots of juice and intensity in it. And De Niro is a phenomenal. He's like a rock. He's his discipline about going. Like if people are trying to edge him in that direction, it ain't gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. If the truth of the thing hasn't been worked out in a way that passes muster with him, then his view is then it has to get sorted out and we have to come back and do it again or whatever. He's like, I'm not giving you what you're looking for the dailies. And for me at that particular moment, it was a very interesting lesson in professionalism, not even so much just depth of craft or whatever, because it was a heist movie, but it was more just like his respectful defense of his own of a value system of quality and honesty, and his refusal in some ways to capitulate to some people who wanted to see him do a certain thing. That there's like that's what we paid. There's the De Niro. It's like and it was good for me at that phase in my career to see a real veteran holding to what he knew to be kind of the keeping things at the level that he understood, that he had conviction in a way. I don't know if I'm saying it that well, but it was very interesting because then later I got to work with him on something much, much stranger, much more like a play, much more. I don't want to say with more depth, but much more psychologically complex, and it was fascinating because we'd done the one and we did the other. This was a movie called Stone that very few people saw. It was a real art film, almost like a Bergman film, very existential, and we rehearsed that like a play. His process, watching him work on that was sort of the one where I was like, oh, wow, this is like seeing him work in the way I kind of always dreamed, like really, really deep investigation, rehearsal, finding it, and then it was kind of, that was a joy. The first one was fun and instructive. The second one was like a creative. It was like when you dream of working with De Niro, that was the one that I was like, that's it. Yeah.
How would you describe the dynamic between yourself, one of the great living filmmakers, Mr. Spike Lee?
Well, he knew that I was like a deep fan. I think at the very beginning of my career in films, He Got Game came out, which is one of his many, many masterpieces. A very unsung masterpiece, in my opinion. I think it's like one of the great films about what fame and money in American life do to the psychology of dreams and people and their values and all of it. And there's such great stuff in that film about fathers and sons and anger. And when I saw it, it melted. I was like, as so many of his films had done for me, it just. And I wrote him a letter. I was like, I think I wrote Denzel too, but I wrote him a letter and just about that film and about what his films had meant to me. Because Do the Right Thing had a massive, massive impact on me. It was probably one of the definitive films of my like young adult life. When we were doing the 25th Hour, Phil Hoffman and I talked about how much Do the Right Thing changed our goals. It changed our aspirations for like the kind of work we wanted to do, because it was so it was such a hand grenade. It was so joyful. It was so funny. It was so entertaining. But it was also like this really serious dive into some of the thorniest issues of American life. And it was this kid. He's like a couple years out of film school, and he like writes and produces and directs and stars in this movie about his neighborhood. And it's like one of the greatest American films of the last 50 years. And it was like, holy crap! Like what a swing! What an amazing, audacious, original thing. And it's serious too. And it was like, that's what you're going for, And so we came on to that one like basically like pretty steeped in Spike and baked in Spike, but it had a it was a great piece, great novel and great script. David Benioff, who created Game of Thrones, it was his novel, it was his adaptation. One thing that I remember that was kind of interesting was David. There's kind of the thing that's pretty well known in the movie of Monty yelling at himself in the mirror, yelling at everything that he hates, but really it's his like, self lashing and
fuck them monologue.
Yeah, and it was in the book. It was in the book, and David didn't put it in the script, or he'd taken it. It wasn't there in the script, and when we all got together around it, Spike was like, "Where's the mirror speech?" And David was like, "Oh, well, it's." He was like, "I don't know. It's such an interior monologue." And Spike goes, "You don't worry about that. I worry about that." He's like, "Put it in." He's like, "Put it in." He goes, "Don't worry. I'll make it good." And it's like, and that's what makes someone like Spike is. He turns a thing into this incredible piece of cinema, and I was Do the Right Thing had a huge effect on Motherless Brooklyn because Do the Right Thing did because it was like someone writing and directing and acting in their own movie, and it was one of many that I was like, hey, like go for it, why not go for it? But also, the 25th Hour, he made the 25th Hour in 26 days. It's the shortest schedule any of us had ever made a film in, and he did it by rehearsing relentlessly for 6 weeks, planning every shot, having a game plan like a football team, and seeing him make that movie in that time, it was like it completely rewrote my idea of what was possible. With, I think the budget was $12 million, and it was 26 days, and it was like, I was like, there's not 3 directors in Hollywood who could make this movie in that kind of a schedule. And it was really inspiring, because I couldn't have made, I had directed a movie before that, but I couldn't have made Motherless Brooklyn. We made Motherless Brooklyn in like 46 days, and we didn't have a lot of money, and it's a big movie. It's a big period piece in New York, and working with Spike, working with Wes Anderson, Alejandro Iñárritu, those people, they have game, like real game on how to get a lot done with a little, and the course of those years of working with those guys definitely like made me more confident that we could do what I wanted to do with the resources that we had.
I know you initially passed up the first chance to play Bruce Banner. Why was that, and what ultimately brought you back for The Incredible Hulk?
I loved it. I loved it as a kid. It's funny, Mark is one of my old friends from New York theater and coming up together, and we're like, the Hulk is like Hamlet. Like lots of people have done it, and for us, like it's Bill Bixby. That's just it. Bill Bixby will always be like the best Banner. But it's fun. It is one of those things. Like honestly, sometimes I'll talk to young actors. I'll be like, look, like some actors have more or less plasticity, some roles have more or less plasticity, and what's great is Hamlet is like. Hamlet can be interpreted a lot of different ways, right? By a lot of different actors. I kind of think Hulk is Hulk, but Banner has got some play in him. You know what I mean? There's a lot of ways you can look at him, and I think they're all. I kind of think it's cool that, in my opinion, only really good people have done it. Like Bill Bixby, Eric Bana's a great actor. I have my spin. Mark's one of the best. It's like it's fantastic. I love that there's this like. it's almost become a tradition. It's almost become a thing unto itself. Yeah.
Like a Shakespeare character.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a
no,
very mythic character.
Birdman, the filmmaking techniques on that film are just mind blowing. How different of an experience was that, just in terms of being on a film set day to day from anything you'd done previously?
It was very singular. Um, Interestingly, because it's about people putting on a play, it was fun to rehearse it. I think it goes without saying, you have to rehearse to do it the way Alejandro wanted to do it in these enormous pieces of 8, 10, 15 minutes of film at a stretch. You know what I mean? It was it was along with the 25th Hour. It was the most I ever rehearsed on a film, and it was fantastic. That process of rehearsal, because it binds everybody together. Like, films are very. It's just like what we're doing here now. There's a lot of distraction. There's a lot all around you is stuff that breaks it up. Breaks up the focus, chops it into little pieces, and when you're making films, it's just there's hundreds of people there, and it's inevitable that people look at they'll check the shot out, they'll see what it's all about, and there's sort of this assessment: am I involved or not? And then people kind of go. And these days, especially, it's like if you look around a film set, it's like you see the tops of heads, like everybody's like this
Anywhere
on
you
their
go.
phones, right? And which is fine. It's fine. Like, actors, I think, have to try to stay in this little bubble of imagination when things are working well. But on that, because of the rehearsal and because of the symbiosis that was required of sound and camera and actors and people literally doing old-fashioned things like coming in under camera to remove a part of a set so that the camera could move through and flying it back in so that when it spun around, it was still there. There was a lot going on, and everybody's involved in every one. And so a thing happened that never happens on a film, which is like cast and crew, everybody together, every shot. It's like everybody's going, you don't want to be the one who drops the ball, right? Mm-hmm. And so everybody's going, and everybody's working, everybody's in gear and focused and holding their breath. And you're going, and when you got to the one where off in the corner somewhere, Alejandro screams like, "Yes, Saul!" It was like a World Cup soccer goal. It was like I've never been on a film set where like someone saying, "We got it." The whole place like erupts, like jumping up and down, screaming, like people hugging each other. I mean, it was like, it was a very, it was such a high wire swing on his part, because also he wasn't faking it. Like, people always were like, "Oh, but he did this or that, or he did little cutaways or something." It's like, no, it was like, they obviously had their clever ways of stitching all the long pieces together, but he was like, "We're gonna make this. This is gonna go into the stratosphere of transcendent, amazing things, or it's gonna crash." There was literally no middle ground, and like being around someone who's working in that gear is like, I mean, it's nothing better. It's like so amazing to see someone creating that forcefully. That's when you're just happy, like as an actor, to be serving someone's vision. And because I loved his work so much, like we used to sit around on Grand Budapest Hotel with all the actors talking about Alejandro's film Beautiful with Javier Bardem. Mm-hmm. One of the most beautiful films, most incredible performances. And when you feel that way about someone's work, then it's so easy to like step in and just go, "What do you need? What you want me to try it black? There's black. If you flip around, try it the other way. Try it the other way." It's like the trust. When the trust is high, you can do really daring things without inhibition.
Finally, if you can think all the way back, well, actually, the journey of this film does go all the way back, which is Motherless Brooklyn. What can you talk about, sort of the journey that you went on to get this film finally made, and the obstacles that you faced?
It's a struggle to write a thing, to get it right, and because I had an ambition to go to a pretty like we were talking about, to go wider, to open up from what's a beautiful character portrait, and to open it up onto a bigger canvas of looking at, some bigger social issues and some dark parts of our history that that I thought were worth like peeling the corner back on. But also, just I wanted to make a film of like the films I loved, like The Godfather and L.A. Confidential or Chinatown, where they start, and it's not about the plot. It's like the photography is right. It's mature and great, and the whole thing has depth. It's not a diorama, and the clothes are right, and the music is great, and the actors are like adult and have weight, and your brain goes click, and suddenly it's just all right. And like when that happens, you have that sensation of like, oh man, this is one of those movies. Like I'm in, and wherever this goes, it's so grown up and it's so mature. It's like The Godfather's over 3 hours long. You don't care. Mm-hmm. You don't care, and it's not because it's exciting along all the way. It's a slow, long thing. You don't care. You're like happy to be there. Mm-hmm. And I felt like people say they don't make those kind of films anymore. It's not that. It's that they're hard. That we talked about Spike Lee. I felt that way about like Warren Beatty's film Reds. It's like one of the greatest films ever made about America. It's a 3-hour movie about American socialists, and it shouldn't work. It has documentary footage from the people who lived through the era. It shouldn't work, but it works. And part of it, I think, is just Warren made that film with conviction, with real conviction that these people represented something, and it's beautifully shot and beautifully acted, and it just has like that thing. It has grown up like weight, and I think those movies prove that grown-up audiences get underestimated all the time. They don't want to get talked down to. They don't mind. They're not looking for comprehension. They want an experience, and I felt like with Motherless Brooklyn, I thought like the reason it was hard to put together is if you want a cast like is in this film, Bruce Willis and Alec Baldwin and Willem Dafoe and Cherry Jones and Bobby Cannavale and Michael K. Williams and Leslie Mann and me and Gugu Mbatha Raw, and it's like it takes a lot of wrangling to get all that together and to get actors willing to do it for no money, and so that we can do it on a price, and to figure out how to get that done and to create the old Penn Station, and again do it like not on like I have $200 million from Netflix, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's it takes time, like, and that gestation is worth a lot. I think some of the best things they take. The slow cook is good, like and it was good for me because it gave me time to get my own sense of this character, this guy with Tourette syndrome and obsessive compulsive disorder, and to kind of get into a non-intellectual place with that, so that by the time I had to direct the film, I had done my work as an actor. It's mm-hmm. like rushing would have screwed up almost everything about this movie, I think. Mm-hmm.